In this video, I'm going to discuss interpreter observations, how it is you're going to be observing interpreters, and also what's going to be required on the report that'll be due later in the semester. First, I want to talk about some do's. So I'll give you a second to read the slide. First, I want to remind you that you should not be observing any interpreters in any class that you have in which you are a student. If you are a student in a class that has an interpreter assigned, you should participate in your class and not observe the interpreter. You should be doing interpreter observations. If we had things open to us, we'd be doing things in person, and you would introduce yourself to the interpreter, introduce yourself to the deaf consumer. And so we are doing things a little bit differently, in which we probably have to do things more online than we can in person. But this is kind of the do's that you would normally do, is you would introduce yourself to the deaf consumer and the interpreter, making both of them aware that there is another signer in the room, and not just a signer, but a student of interpreting. That's an important thing to know, and an important distinction to make, because it also sets a standard expectation to how you will behave and how you will conduct yourself. Ask permission to observe. So you're asking not just the deaf consumer, but the interpreter as well, if they're okay with an observation. Always accept a no answer gracefully. It might not be the day for them. It might be too personal of a situation. They're not feeling up to the task of being observed, and that's fine. Accept a no and try again another day. Something that you should be aware of is that if you are observing an interpreter, many interpreters will expect that you are probably going to take some notes, and also that you'll have some questions for them after. Many times an interpreter wants to discuss a sign choice they may have made, or even say, hey, let me clarify, that was actually an error and I self-corrected later. They want to let you know those things. This is also a reason why we ask for permission and not just observe an interpreter, because if you're just observing the interpreter without giving them the opportunity to discuss why they may have done something, you've kind of robbed them of the chance to explain. And something could be so simple as to why they made one choice over another. It could be a sign preference choice from the deaf consumer. It really could be anything. It could be that this word keeps coming up and they've decided they'll sign it this way, but maybe the interpreter will say to you, I'll never sign it this way in another situation. Whatever the case may be, you want to give them a chance to explain that. Things you should not do. I'll give you a second to look at that. So you should not be distracting, because remember, if you're observing an interpreter in whatever location or whatever assignment it might be, this is an actual setting in which someone needs to be in. So the deaf person needs to be in a meeting, the deaf person needs to be in their class, the deaf person needs to participate. So you don't want to distract them, and you don't want to distract a working interpreter from doing their job and from the ability to focus and to process the information. So never copy sign while the interpreter is working. If there is a team, you should not attempt to engage the off interpreter even while the other interpreter's on. And even if they're checking their phone and not watching the on interpreter, you should just not be distracting. You should be watching. And don't assume that because they used a sign in a specific setting, that that sign you can now use anywhere and everywhere and to mean the same thing. Don't take it as this is the glass for that sign and that's not what it means. Just assume that it's depending on the situation, and that's probably a good time to ask something. If you saw a sign that's new to you, Maybe you ask them, is that the sign for blah, blah, blah? Or why did you use it that way, etc. But at the same time, don't get so tied up on your notes that you miss good stuff happening because it's a great opportunity to learn. What you're looking for is their sign choices, and you're looking for just the way they chose to interpret a concept, and you're looking for things that you want to add to your own toolbox and your own bag of tricks, and you're looking for things that maybe you weren't sure that's how you signed it. Maybe you disagree. You're just looking for a new perspective and a new approach to what's out there. So, what is it again that you're observing? You got to be a critical observer of the interpretation process. Your job is to look and discuss only the work. But I want to say the work and add also professional interpreting choices. So you're looking at their sign choices, uh, how they're managing a situation. Maybe someone's upset. Someone's trying to move the interpreter out of the way or trying to move the deaf person out of the front row seat for self-correction or for they had a difficulty hearing something. Did they express that to the client or did they just keep going and drop information? You're looking for those things, those choices that they're making because you want to ask why did they choose to do things that way? Why did they choose one way over another? Example, why did you drop information versus speak up or say it or say that you dropped information? Um, why did they do the things that they do is basically what you're looking for. At the end of the observation, usually an interpreter will ask if you have any questions for me. This is when you get to say, hey, I saw you use a sign for this, but you fingerspelled the word. Why did you make that choice? An example is I'll take in my own videos I've been posting, you'll see that sometimes, although there's a sign for but, I choose to fingerspell it. If you were to ask me why am I choosing to fingerspell it, is I'm trying to emphasize, like doing like a but, that's why I fingerspell it. And that's an ASL feature that you'll see sometimes people will fingerspell, oh, that hurt. They're trying to emphasize that word. You may say to them, I saw you sign this when they meant that. And then that word came up again and you signed something different. What was your reasoning behind that? Uh, you'll find that it might be self-correction, but there might be also an intention behind it. And those are the things that you want to know. And if you saw a cool sign, a sign that's new to you, you might say to them, can you show me that sign again so that you get it right? So you get to leave with a new sign and new vocabulary for yourself. So I'd like to add that when you're taking notes during an observation, you really should be looking. Don't get so tied up in your notes that you're more about the notes than about the interpretation. And so it's a good, you're looking for a balance. You want a good balance of some healthy note taking, but also some healthy watching. And what you're looking for is the speaker said this phrase in this way, and the interpreter signed it this way. For example, um, the speaker may say, it'll be very helpful if you clean up after. And maybe the interpreter signed, not it'll be very helpful, but maybe they're like, it'll be very helpful if you clean up after. And you're writing those things down like, hey, wait a minute. The speaker said helpful, and the interpreter changed that concept to beneficial. That's an interesting thing to do. Why would they do that? That's a cool thing that I want to add to my bag of tricks because the goal of an interpreter is, as we'll learn through the semester, is not to interpret word for word, but to interpret for meaning and to interpret for concepts. And that's what you're looking for. You're trying to catch those things when you're doing your interpreter observations. But you're also looking for professional choices that they're making. Why did they choose to wear what they wore? Why did they choose to sit at that location and not that location? And maybe I noticed an interpreter came into the classroom but walked all the way around to get to her seat. Why did she do that? Those kinds of things. Why are they making these choices? Um, because you want to know, so that you know the reason behind things, and you might add that to your own way of working in the future. And you may see a team of interpreters. When you're observing a team of interpreters, you'll see that interpreters tend to switch every 20 minutes. Sometimes that's adjusted to 15, depending on the speed and of the speaker and the workload. And sometimes, for the same reason, uh, not so fast kind of speed, not so demanding kind of job might get adjusted to 30 minutes, but the standard tends to be 20. If no one has talked about it, they're going to switch at 20. But usually, if interpreters haven't worked together before, um, they'll agree on the time and adjust accordingly. What you're looking for when you're watching a team of interpreters is the off interpreter watching the on interpreter? That might be a little bit difficult to see in this era of Zoom and online observations that we may have to do, but you may catch it. I have been watching some news briefings, and I noticed that I couldn't see the off interpreter, but when they switched and their style and signs kind of agreed, I knew that interpreter was watching. So you can kind of catch that kind of thing. Um, because of the second bullet also, are they agreeing on sign choices or are they completely off doing their own thing? That means they're either not watching or they do not like each other and are not agreeing. Um, Also, does the switch, is the off interpreter coming on, pick up where that interpreter left off, or do they just drop information? How are they making the switch happening? How are they signaling each other? Are you seeing a small head nod or a thumbs up or a shift in body? Um, you can see that on online sessions. I've seen the off interpreter turn their video off, and then when they're getting ready to come back on, their video comes back on, and they don't immediately switch. They're waiting to get the other person's attention, but those are the things that you're looking for. How are they signaling each other? And is the on interpreter acknowledging the signal and then waiting for a natural break? Or are they just, I'm done and switching? Those are the kind of things that you're looking for. Here's what the assignment with your interpreter observations will require. So for this class, our goal is to complete 10 observation hours for the whole semester. I would normally require more hours, but because we have to get creative, I know that that's going to be difficult, and so 10 is the goal. And if we can get more in, we'll get more in. But 10 is the goal for your paper. You should include an overall description of your observation experience. Did you actually see any people in person? Was it all on Zoom? Was it pre-recorded? Did you get to do live stuff? And did you have a chance to actually connect with an interpreter and ask questions about their work? Um, you'll have to include some of the notes that you have made, um, making some observations, some comparisons, some notes of sign choices, um, professional choices made, things that you saw happening specific to interpreting. Um, Kind of tell me the story of your observations. And really important, after you tell me the story of your observations, I want to get your critical reaction. So, this is what I saw. This was my experience. I was able to touch base with so and so. I wish I could have asked these questions with this other person. I might have asked a few questions, include the questions you would have asked, and then your reaction to all of it. And what I mean by your reaction, it could be anything, but I need you to say how you felt. Wow, interpreters are amazing. What a load they have on their shoulders to, eh, it's nothing. This is what I think. We make a big deal, but it's not. Whatever your reaction might be based on your observation time, and connect it to what we've got happening in class. So your critical reaction must include also a connection to class content. It could be any connection that you make. Um, your paper will be 3 to 4 pages, typed and double spaced. I have posted an observation log that you'll have to include. That'll be a separate sheet, so it's not part of the 3 to 4 pages. And the observation log will include the names of the interpreters and kind of the situations that you've observed. So if you use their names in your paper, um, it'll be easy to connect. I also am probably going to be referring you to most of those observations, so I'll know who you're talking about, etc. So I have just added to the bullet that says your critical reaction and connected to class content, so you have all that information there. This paper will not be due until we complete those 10 hours, and it will take us some time to get those 10 hours completed and get those opportunities. But it also may take us some time to watch a few and kind of get the habit of taking notes and of looking and watching and seeing what we're looking for. So if you choose to do observations on your own because you found some links online, I only ask you to make sure that you can get the interpreter name. And so it might be difficult to just find random interpreters if you aren't able to see the name. Um, and I'm hoping that you can stick to finding some interpreters in the West Coast, Southern California area because dialects and style and sign choices can vary. And so I would prefer if you observed interpreters that are local or at least Southern California. That concludes the video for interpreter observations and for the guidelines of your paper. I will post on Canvas when that paper will be due. But again, it won't be till toward the end of the semester because you must first complete the 10 hours, the 10 observation hours.